Hey, this is Krista. Welcome back to MadeToBeWhole. Stay tuned for our first guest of 2026, Aicila, who's the inspiration behind the podcast and part of our foundations program.
MadeToBeWhole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on MadeToBeWhole. Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing.
So we have this week one of my BFFs, Aicila, who I've known since our freshman year in college. I think we met in line at the movie theater. Is that possible?
I don't remember.
I don't. I think
probably a
I
movie.
think at the varsity. I think we met in line at the varsity.
That sounds right.
Well, there's a little history there. So I was a guest on Aicila's podcast 1.5 years ago. She pushed me hard to do this and helps engineer and produce and support this, but then has had a lot of success with her own health journey that really reframed kind of what and how we offer, because she had really, really great improvements with the basics, which would be like the nutrients and the hormones. And I'm way too used to people who are like so sick and require more. And I just got to be thinking there has to be more people like her that we could help with just doing the basics. Let's make this accessible to more people. So welcome, Aicila.
Thank you. And I will say that, and I think I told you this at the time, the podcast I had you on is still one of my most listened to. It's like the top 3. And it's because it's so accessible. You make, and we'll get into this in the show, but one of the things that I just appreciated about Krista as a professional and a friend is she makes a lot of this complex information very accessible. And she gives you the power to understand your own health journey and make the decisions that are available to you with like the best information possible. So I went from, for me, with just a few adjustments in my nutrients after taking the nutrient panel, from having, I was like a decent baseline, but knowing things weren't quite right, to really feeling a lot more capable. I can focus more, I can work more, I have more joy. I'm exercising again. I wasn't running. I used to run all the time. And it just, it feels, and I don't want to dunk too much on the health system, but I will, which is that like I couldn't get even the tests from my doctor when I was like, I think something's off. Maybe I need a hormone test. And he's like, you just need to exercise. And I'm like, but I do. And I hear that from a lot, honestly, of other women my age who talk about they know something's off. They really just want to get a sense of it so they can do the work to take care of themselves. And they can't even get access to the information. I talk about it a lot with people. And every time I tell someone about it, they're just like, because they see my life is better. They're like, well, does Krista practice here? And I'm just like, I don't think so. She's telehealth in Colorado, though. You should go to Ohio.
Yes, I am. And I do now have my Utah license. We talked about that.
Oh, good.
And I have a Kentucky license. We're working on expanding. Like, we wouldn't be able to do the heavy treatment stuff we do for people who are far away without coming. But what we've done for you and had good results, it was very motivating to me. Can you give people, I think it's really interesting, your background, even before we did this test, your story with B12 and those deficiencies and what had hijacked your health a few years back.
All right. Well, so in 2017, I had been at that point for a few years actually struggling with undiagnosed acid reflux. And the way that I present acid reflux apparently is not typical. So I didn't actually know I had it. I was experiencing more and more of the symptoms that I did have, which was I had a very stuffy throat and actually burned my vocal cords. Over the course of 2 years, I lost my voice. It did really impact my life, though. And I went to the doctor probably in those 2 years every couple of months because I thought maybe I have allergies. Maybe I have a cold. I easily took a couple of rounds of antibiotics that I didn't need. I had an inhaler for a while also that I didn't need. I was put on Flonase. And I finally got a referral to an allergist, and they lie you down, they poke your back. And I had, 52 things. And he's like, you have a mild allergy to this one grass that grows up in the mountains. And I was despairing, honestly. I was like, how is this possible? How I am not okay. And he actually listened to me. And he said, well, tell me more about it. And it's like, okay, when I was traveling, some of my symptoms had cleared up a little bit. And he's like, allergies just don't work that way. And after he talked to me for a little while longer, he said, all right, you either have a throat tumor or you have acid reflux. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. But, just over the years of listening to people, he said, go try this. And he gave me the name of a medication. I think it was Prevacid, but the generic at Costco. He said, go take this. And if you get better, then you have acid reflux. He said, but go see a gastroenterologist because there are impacts of taking this medication long term, and you should get familiar with that. So I go to Costco, I get that, and within 3 weeks, my life is better. Like I'm no longer coughing myself awake. It also had led to sleep deprivation because it was so bad at night that I couldn't sleep. And so I did. I felt like he knows what he was talking about. So I went to the gastroenterologist, and they did the scope. They're like, you have a flap that doesn't work quite right. And he said, if I take this medication long term, there could be negative impacts. And she's like, oh no, it's fine. And that was everything. So that was in 2017. And then 2 years ago, I went to another doctor because I could tell that I wasn't quite there. Like I was forgetting things. My daughter was apparently making plans for me to go into a memory care facility because my memory was even worse than I realized. And she did a bunch of tests. I'm 51. Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, no. I was like 48 or 49. And my daughter was just like she didn't tell me this directly. She didn't want to upset me. But apparently she was talking to her brother and her husband about mom's not okay. And so then I went and found another doctor who, and I will tell you, this is a side note. I do a lot of research. I go to health grades. I find doctors that are reviewed, and I look for doctors where people say things like, this doctor noticed this other thing that I didn't know was a problem. And then I look for one that's on my insurance and if I don't have time to do that, I don't get the better care. That's just been really consistent. So I finally in my life in a place where I felt like I could do that. I went and found a doctor who was really, once again, really curious about what was happening. She did a bunch of tests, and she called me almost in a panic. She was like, you need to get in here right away. You have a severe B12 deficiency. Like she wanted me to come in that day, the minute she got my results. And I looked it up. I was like, what leads to that? And lo and behold, the number one impact, or the number one listed cause of that was the medication, the acid medication that I was on. I was just like, well, I guess my allergist really knew what he was talking about. I should have gone back to him. And then once I got on the B12, things really started to change. Did that for about a year, but that doctor ended up leaving that practice, and the one that replaced her or took her place was not as investigative or interested in trying to figure out things. And so he didn't see the need for me to be on the B12, but I could tell, having gotten better, that there was something about my functionality that was better when I was on it. And so then but I was still taking different supplements, but I wasn't taking the shots anymore. And when we did my micronutrient test, even with me taking 4 kinds of supplements, my B12 was still really low. And so in addition to the medication, I also probably have an absorption issue, which might be why it was so intense after like 5 years.
Well, and I think of note too, that was on the intracellular testing because the regular plasma levels looked high.
Okay.
High enough that I know some people who practice would say, you're taking too much B12, your B12 is too high. But it was really clear, even though you were taking and good quality supplements, that it wasn't getting into your cells. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you restarted B12 shots. And how quickly did you notice a difference?
Oh, almost immediately. Like there was a huge change and it's just little things like I've always been a person who wakes up in the morning and gets out of bed right away. And when I was very deficient, that was super not the case. And when I was starting to get slightly more deficient again, like after going off the shots, it was still a little more hesitant in the morning. I think of it, if you've ever lifted weights and you go to or you just pick up a baby and sometimes your muscles just feel like they don't want to fire. That was how my brain felt. Like I had gotten a new sewing machine and I was trying to figure out how to use it. and I felt like I couldn't lift my brain muscle. And now, no problem. Like, I want to try and learn something. I could sit down. Like, I still have to, focus on all of those things. But the muscle is firing now in a way that it just wasn't. And the other thing that's interesting, my aunt and my mother both passed away with dementia. And when I called my cousin about 6 months after I started the shots, and we were just catching up, and I said, oh, I started B12. And she's like, oh, that's really important. Both your mom and my mom were really deficient. We think that was why they had the dementia, but we didn't catch it with my mom until she was so far gone. And I was like, oh, that's not something we talk about in the family. I've, of course, told my kids this. I'm like, watch your B12. But it's really interesting to me that the first thing that when I told my cousin was she was immediately concerned for my health. And so in some ways, I feel like it was a gift, even though those were very hard years, that I caught it so early, because if it had never gotten that bad, I don't know that I would have been motivated to investigate at the level that I was. And I feel like I have given myself a huge preventative edge in terms of the future that I saw my mother have.
So then we also checked your hormones.
Oh, yeah.
What difference did you see with hormone replacement?
That was also, I think that's where the energy, I got a little bit of the brain fog, and I definitely had less joy. I honestly, like, there was something about that. And then the exercising and the motivation, like, even though I had that desire to get up with the B12 and motivate, when I started the hormones, I felt more energized to go out. And I also felt like the other thing that was really discouraging was I hadn't really significantly changed my diet, but I was just constantly gaining weight and getting on the hormones, I should say, getting the right amount. And it's a really small amount, actually. I feel like I can exercise. I'm building muscle instead of just gaining weight no matter what I do. Like, I don't even think I was looking at food and I was gaining weight. It was not fun.
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but with you, a lot of those improvements were more gradual. Kind of, you got to like a 6-month point and looked back and thought, things have changed. Because I think some people really want everything to be fast. And I mean, sometimes you knew right away you needed B12 shots the first time you started them, and you saw a difference with that. But with some of these things, it's not like you start taking a little bit of testosterone, progesterone, and then your body self-corrects. It's got to restore and get back to where it was.
They talk about, doom spirals, and I feel like I'm on like a joy spiral. And it does amplify itself, right? And yeah, so it was November of last year that I think I took the hormone test, but I couldn't start anything until February. But even just so, like, I would say, but between November and June, lost 30 pounds. I felt more like function in my life. Like, I started being more social. I started sleeping better. I started exercising more. And I just honestly relaxed a little bit. Like, I know that maybe not sound like a benefit from medication or supplements, but I really do feel like things were moving through me differently. And yeah, so but yeah, it was probably 6 months from starting everything to when I really looked back and said, oh, wow, there's been a huge difference. But I will say incrementally, I could feel every week like a little bit of, oh, this is a little easier, or even things like I don't feel the need to snack on sugar all the time. Like, my energy was so low that even though I was getting decent sleep, I was constantly looking for some kind of like, sugar, something like that. And it's so I feel like, yeah, there's so many little things that added up, and I was hyper aware of them because I had been, because of what happened with the B12 and losing my cognition, I was really paying attention to what is and isn't changing, because it was really important to me to get onto a better track.
Well, and it's interesting when you talk about genes. Sometimes people just talk big, like, oh, your mom had dementia, your aunt had dementia, it was really bad. Just hope you didn't get the bad genes and you don't get dementia. But what if really the gene was the inability to absorb B12 and you got that, but there's something you can do about that. That's exciting because unfortunately, I mean, it was really rough with your mom, and you carried some pretty heavy burdens as the only child, and just seeing her suffer and not having interventions. I mean,
Yeah.
it's dementia's rough. Dementia's rough.
Yeah. Well,
You
and it
also
gives me
had kind of a go ahead.
no. Go ahead.
I was just going to say you had a bit of a almost fortuitous urinary tract infection that treating also like took things to a next level. Could you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. And that was actually when I started. So when my health had gotten better, I was feeling more motivated to exercise. And every time I did, I had the leaking that women can have. And I always associated it with, having babies or, whatever. And then I had a urinary tract infection. And so we treated that. And afterwards, no more leaking. I was like, I can run again. I genuinely didn't realize until we fixed it that the subconscious hesitation that I had was around the fact that like bouncing had such an unpleasant result. I was like, I don't like this. But I love running, and I've taken the Genomind test. I took that about like 8 years ago, and I have a variant that means that exercise is just really, really good for my brain, which I know is true. And walking is fine. I like walking, but I've always really loved running. And so to be able to do that again, some of it was losing weight, made it like hurt less to run. But then also the final piece of it was treating the urinary tract infection. It just made everything, once again, slightly better. Each of these little micro adjustments and so many more opportunities.
And I think it's interesting too, because with you, I have some people who have these like chronic intractable UTIs that take us a really, really long time to treat. But weren't you on like 2 weeks of an antibiotic? Or I mean, it wasn't a long course, and you've had these sustained benefits. And a lot of people will tell women, oh, you don't really have a UTI. We're not going to test you. You don't have symptoms because you don't have severe pain. Unless you have severe pain, they say you don't have symptoms, but leaking is a symptom. Incontinence is a symptom. Having to run to the bathroom constantly, no matter what you drink or don't drink, is a symptom that really can affect your relationships and your quality of life and all that jazz.
Well, and I do think that like the more, how do I say this, the more subtle symptoms can be more insidious, because most people I think are pretty resilient, and they're like, oh, okay, I didn't have like a thought, I'm not going to run. I just had a few experiences and so like, well, find another way. We're just going to find another way. And I see that as a positive. I see it as a positive trait in other people and in myself. And also it's actually something I'm trying to notice more, because I think the downside of it is that you then dismiss things that could allow you to catch something before it's a problem, before it's a burden to you and others in your life, and before it becomes preventative of like larger options in your world. So it's both it's a beautiful quality that many people have, and trying to find another place, because you don't want to go too far where you're like focused on every little thing, and noticing things and patterns that are keeping you from things you like, so that you can see if there is a solution. Maybe there isn't, but at least look for one, right?
Right. Then you also did something I think is super cool, which is you gifted your son for his birthday a micronutrient test. What a great gift. But do you mind sharing some of the changes you've seen in him since those were corrected?
The knowledge, and I cannot stress this enough, the knowledge is so helpful, because you can say, oh, I have this experience of myself. And, oftentimes, like, we go blame. And for him to see, oh, I just needed this supplement, like he sleeps better and he's a little happier, like he's just more even keeled, he feels more of a sense of control in his life, because he can see that some of the things that he thought were his personality were just a nutrient deficiency, and he's in less pain as a mom, obviously, or a human that cares about people. Honestly, you don't like to see people in pain, and he had a lot of physical pain that was from inflammation. And once he started taking the Inflammacor, that was hugely adjusted. Yeah, no, that was a great present for me to, I mean, I got a lot out of it because we lived together. So I get to see his joy and his even keeledness. But it was, I knew it was one of those things where it's hard to prioritize. It's hard to prioritize when you've got all sorts of other bills. And I had, a little bit of extra, and I thought, I think everyone's going to be happier. And it was great. It was really great. I highly recommend that as a gift.
Yeah, and he was also of the mindset too that he was willing, ready to take the plunge and act on it, because that's an investment too. He's got to spend money on the supplements, and just that you're young, you don't want to necessarily think about your health and pills and powders and all of that, but he's been willing to do that and do hard things, and he sees the benefits. And I think also, I'm sure it helped that he saw the benefits for you. Modeling that for your family is a big deal. You cannot force other people into wellness, but you can model self-care. So also, you are the one that really turned me on to reading more about intermittent fasting because of his experience. He was on the podcast, and then you started doing intermittent fasting to be supportive. It wasn't because of diabetes. How has that impacted your health?
Well, I will tell you, I really am irritated because it's been really effective, but also I started doing it and removing sugar to be supportive because of his situation. And then I felt so much better. And I was like, that's not fair. I wanted it to be him, but it's apparently both of us. I'm like, I'm less cranky, which makes him less cranky. And so just that, but the mood stabilizing is great. I found my window is 12 to 6. And the thing that's really interesting to me is initially when I started it, I was pretty regimented about it. And now I'm a little bit more flexible, but I think it's a habit that I'm going to have my whole life, because it absolutely does. It just changes how everything works. My digestion works a little bit better. I definitely sleep better. My mood is significantly better. My energy is good. And even if I don't make all the best choices in that 6-hour window, which I do try to be pretty fruit and vegetable forward here. But even if I don't make 100% great choices, it doesn't have a massive impact on me the way that when I just would kind of snack all the time and I didn't have that window. And I've tried longer and shorter ones, and I can do like 11 to 7, but really 12 to 6 is my best time.
It's your sweet spot. And then I thought it was interesting, you were telling me about you were on vacation and you cheated, which is fine because vacation's delicious. Yeah. And, you know, how often does one go to Ireland? But how did you feel when you had the delicious sugar binge at the Italian restaurant? What happened to your body?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I went to this Italian restaurant and I had all the things that I don't have ever all at once. And I'm usually very careful about making sure I have some kind of protein, but I didn't. I had gnocchi, I had tiramisu, I had hot chocolate. It was delicious. And I was buzzing for like 2 hours. My whole body, like, I don't think I felt this way in a very long time. And then I had sort of weird mood stuff that I haven't had, like weird sort of up and down feelings of sadness walking around Ireland. That had nothing to do with Ireland. So it was kind of good to see, oh, okay, some of these feelings that I have are pretty nutritionally motivated, but then also recognizing, because that buzz is always going to be followed by a crash. So I was like, oh, okay. So I know now in about an hour, luckily we were just going to get on a bus because we were doing a little bus tour, but being really aware that I can't eat like I'm 20 anymore. I probably shouldn't have eaten like that when I was 20, but I definitely can't do it now because it didn't feel good. I mean, I will say, of all of the times that I've like binged on something that was not great for me, this one felt worth it. Like, it was so delicious. I was just like, yeah.
Well, you're on vacation.
I don't regret it. But like, there were times like I had a Hostess cupcake several years ago and I won't have another one. Like, that was not worth it at all.
Right.
This was completely worth it. And it was good to realize I don't have to make 100% good decisions, but I do need to consistently be thoughtful about how my body processes food and sugar, and that protein first and those fresh fruits and vegetables are really key to my whole being, including my brain feeling good.
And we've talked about too, but I think also even the quality of the junk that you put in, we don't realize how much of what we snack and treat ourselves with has so many fillers and other things. We talked about ice cream, but for me, if I have a treat day and I get just cheap ice cream, it's going to make me feel like garbage. If I get some really nice ice cream that doesn't have all that artificial stuff, it really doesn't have the same impact. I can enjoy it, and it doesn't affect my brain the same way. It doesn't affect my gut the same way. So a lot of a lot of the treats we eat, besides us not needing sugar, they just have a lot of other things that our bodies weren't made to handle in the quantities that our society feeds them to us in.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, because even though you could say our careers are not the same, we have very similar philosophies, which I think is why we jive. I'm always looking for, integrative health and the best of both worlds. Do you want to tell people about Bicurian and what you do and how you embrace that, looking for common ground?
When I work with my clients, so I do a lot of support for them in building business systems that work for them. And it is similar philosophy where I really want to figure out like what's happening for them. How do they work? How do they think? How do they feel alive in their business and in their life? And then let's find ways to build a system that actually supports that, as opposed to the idea that we live in where there's just like a right way to do business. If you're not a morning person, you don't have to get up at 8. Like every once in a while, maybe you need to have a morning meeting, but people come into doing their business with that idea that it has to be a way. And I had for a while a podcast that was a passion project that comes from that philosophy of instead of starting with like this sort of aggressive reactions that we have to just about anything, why don't we try to figure out the and? Like, let's embrace the whole picture as opposed to, I have to love literature and hate campy movies, which, by the way, spoiler alert, I love them both. But we get these ideas about how we have to think and be, and then we reject parts of who we are until we are this very limited, small subset of ourselves. And so that is where Bicurian started for me, was really just seeing that in the world, like how many people hurt themselves because they felt like they weren't allowed to be a whole person. And let's be clear, I'm not talking about antisocial destructive behaviors. However, you can start with acknowledging like, oh, I have rage. Like you had a child that struggled with rage, and then say, okay, what do we need to do to look at that, knowing you're a good human and your path of being able to help them find a supplement that was able to address that. But they had to start with seeing the whole picture. You can't pretend something is one thing or the other and then effectively build from there. And I found that was true in the podcast. I found that's true with my clients. I found that's true with my health. I found that's true with parenting. And it really does make a huge difference when you can get someone who can support you in that too. Like as a business practitioner, being a consultant and being on the outside, I'm not bogged down with the same thinking about how it has to be. I'm not in those patterns, I guess. And so I can say, hey, what if you tried this? And the number of times people will be like, oh, I'm just allowed to do it that way. I'm like, it's your business.
Right. Well, and one of the things you talk about that I think can impact people's health is how your most valuable asset is your time, and how you encourage people to budget their energy. How would you take that principle and apply it to people's health and health journey?
So I came up with this. I'm very proud of it. It's also cheesy, so I'm still a little self-conscious about it. It's the energy equation.
And it's trademarked now.
It's trademarked. Energy, and it's E equals MC squared. So you already know that. It's your momentum, your connection, and your creativity. And the thing is, we can't really use our time and our money very well when we don't have the energy to think, or the energy that we need to make decisions or to do things. And a lot of us don't think about cultivating those three energies because oftentimes they're sort of natural. It's intuitive. But then when you get busy, you start to drop things. And so, for example, somebody might be relying, when I talk about connection, that's your relationship. So maybe you're relying on your spouse or your friend, and they usually help you with something. But if you don't take care of that relationship, then eventually you could have a rift, or, even, some people will lose a partner over demanding too much without really replenishing it. I'm not trying to make it about being transactional. So I try to avoid that language. But similarly in your health journey, like if you spend every day like eating crap and feeling crappy and being grumpy because of it, and you don't notice that, then you are going to put a burden on your friendships and your relationships. You're going to be an unpleasant person and people won't want to interact with you.
Right.
And so you
Right.
have to think about, like, how am I engaging? And if you find yourself, if you look at, oh my gosh, I really am being short with this person that I like. I would be upset if somebody else treated that person that way. Maybe I need to pay attention to what's causing that. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I transferring upsetness about something with someone else to this person? Am I eating properly? Have I had a physical lately? Because it is all entwined. And especially for, we talk a lot about it with entrepreneurs, but whether you work for someone or work for yourself, you're still the same person when you go to work. So if you don't take care of yourself as a person, you are going to be some aspect of that interacting with other people. And if you don't want to be grumpy, like I noticed with my sugar, it's like, okay, it's good for me to know that if I over binge, I'm going to be a little bit moody. And I don't love that because I like sugar and fat. They're like two of my favorite food groups. Mostly, though, I think being honest with yourself is a big part of it. And noticing really the people that you impact. A lot of us walk around either feeling really like we don't have a lot of influence or that we don't matter. And then because of that, it actually causes a lot of harm because we don't realize that we are actually creating stress or difficult conditions for other people.
And if we don't invest in our health, then we are limiting our capacity to care for others.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's this, I think it's sincere but false modesty in people who think they can't spend on themselves or they're not worth it. And you see it a lot with moms. I know there are other people too, but especially with moms, they want to put everyone first. But really, it is the whole oxygen mask on the plane thing. I think it was important that you did your nutrient testing in your journey first. And then you said, okay, I'm feeling better. Hey, this would be cool. Let me reach out and help my son. What would your advice be to anyone who is struggling with the decision to invest in micronutrient testing or hormone testing or some of these foundational health things that especially middle-aged women should get a hold on sooner rather than later?
I mean, I would say don't hesitate. And I'm not going to pretend that it's easy or that it or cheap. Most people do the oil change in their car, right? Like you're like, wow, it's expensive. I need this car to get from place to place. And most of us do like virus scans on our computer because we know that a virus will shut us down. And so it's just take that same thoughtfulness to your equipment and apply it to yourself. Because something Krista said on the podcast recently that I thought was really pointed is we are living longer, but we're not necessarily living better. And the reality is that for me, the motivation was I have kids and I'm going to have grandkids. But also for me, like I worked my whole life. I just got to go to Ireland and see my friends. And I don't want that to be something I'm doing for the next 2 years. I want to go until the day I fall over.
Right.
And I want to be the parent that when I come to visit, that my kids feel like they get to have fun and the grandkids feel like that I'm going to be there to do the fun things or teach them something. Not that they have to take care of me. And I know they will. They're good humans. But that's not what I want for me. I want mobility. I want opportunity. I want to be able to connect and reach out and really live life. I think life is amazing. And it's not a guarantee. I will say that too. But think about it the way that you would think about anything that you value, that you want to take care of. Just put yourself in the same bin. It'd be at least as important to yourself as your car. That's all.
No, that's true. I mean, there are a lot of people who take much better care of their cars than their bodies. That's, yeah, and value it more. Well, thank you. And thank you for motivating me on this journey. It's been a lot of fun. I 100% would not have done it without your hassling or encouragement. I don't know what you want to call it, but I'm very, very grateful. And I would just encourage our listeners to remember that you matter too, that sometimes their small things can make a tremendous difference and that you're worth investing in. So remember to have hope because you were made to be whole.
Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.